My husband's work wife sent him a text at midnight, "I wish you were here instead." My hand shook as I typed, "Me too. Meet me tomorrow?" The next day, I showed up instead of him, and when she saw me sitting at their usual cafe table, her smile faded. I placed his wedding ring on the table and whispered, "Since he won't tell you the truth, I will." Her reaction changed everything. I never thought I'd be that woman. The one checking her husband's phone while he sleeps. The one whose heart pounds in her throat as she reads a message that changes everything. But here I was. It was late. Almost 12:30 a.m. The soft blue glow from Daniel's phone screen was the only light in our dark bedroom. He had fallen asleep with it in his hand, something he never did. That should have been my first clue. I hadn't meant to go through it. I really hadn't. But then I saw the notification. "Isabel, I wish you were here instead." My stomach dropped. I stared at the words, my mind racing to make sense of them. Isabel. His work wife. The woman I had met at last year's Christmas party, who had introduced herself with a too wide smile and an energy that felt a little too familiar. I had ignored my instincts. I had trusted him. Now, I was staring at proof that I shouldn't have. Daniel shifted beside me. I held my breath, waiting for him to wake up, to catch me, to force me into a conversation I wasn't ready to have. But he just let out a small sigh and rolled onto his other side. I exhaled slowly. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I did something I never thought I'd do. I replied. "Me too. Meet me tomorrow?" My hands trembled as I typed. The second I hit send, the typing bubbles appeared. "Isabel, lunch at our spot?" I nearly laughed. Our spot. Not my spot. Not our spot. Their spot. My pulse pounded in my ears as I forced myself to type back. Yes. 12 p.m. Can't wait. Then, I turned off his phone, set it back on the nightstand, and stared at the ceiling for the rest of the night. By the time Daniel woke up, I had already been awake for hours. I made coffee like normal. I kissed him on the cheek like normal. I watched him get dressed like normal. But nothing felt normal. I memorized the way he tied his tie, the way he ran a hand through his hair as he checked his phone. I saw the small crease in his forehead as he read Isabel's message. He didn't respond. He just smirked. Like it was some inside joke. Like I was too stupid to notice. I wanted to smash my coffee mug against the counter. Instead, I forced a smile and asked, "Busy day?" He looked up, startled. "Yeah. Meetings all morning." Liar. I tilted my head. "Lunch plans?" He hesitated for half a second. Half a second too long. "Just eating at my desk," he finally said. Another lie. I nodded, acting like I believed him. Then I watched him leave, my heart hammering so hard it made me nauseous. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just grabbed his wedding ring from the nightstand and left. The cafe was small, tucked between two office buildings downtown. I had never been there before, but I recognized it from our joint bank statements. A few dollars here, a few dollars there. Enough to go unnoticed. It was quiet inside, the kind of place where people whispered over coffee and leaned in close. And there she was. Isabel sat at a table near the window, scrolling through her phone, her expression light, expectant. She thought she was meeting him. I walked straight toward her. I slid into the chair across from her. Set my bag down. Then, I reached into my pocket and pulled out his wedding ring. I placed it on the table between us. It made a small, sharp sound against the wood. She flinched. "Since he won't tell you the truth, I will." For a second, she didn't speak. Then, she let out a breathless, awkward laugh. I don't know what you mean." I stared at her. "Don't insult me," I said. Her smile vanished. She looked down at the ring, then back up at me. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I leaned forward. "You're not the only one." Her eyebrows pulled together. "What?" I took my phone out, tapped the screen, and slid it across the table. It was already open to the messages. Not her messages. Someone else's. Amanda. Another woman. Another affair. Isabel's face paled. She hesitated, then slowly picked up my phone. Her eyes flicked back and forth as she read. Then, her entire expression crumbled. At first, she just stared. Then, she swallowed hard and set the phone down. Her voice cracked. "This isn't real." But it was. He said you were distant." That he was thinking of leaving. I clenched my jaw. Did he, now? She nodded, her face tight. He said we were different. That we had a connection. I looked down at my hands, pressing my fingers into the table. It was all so cliché. The same story, the same lines, the same empty promises. And she had fallen for it. Just like Amanda had. Just like who knows how many others had. She let out a bitter laugh. We should ruin him. I blinked. What? She looked up at me, her eyes sharp, determined. He thinks he's untouchable, right? That he can keep all of us separate. That he can do this and get away with it. I didn't say anything. She leaned in. But we found each other. I swallowed. She sat back, crossed her arms, and smiled. Well, she said. What are we gonna do about it? I stared at her. She stared back. For a long time, neither of us spoke. This was the part where I was supposed to walk away. Go home. Process. Pack a bag. Make a plan. But instead, I asked the question that had been burning in my throat since the second she looked at my phone. How long? She blinked. How long, I repeated, my voice steady. How long have you been seeing him? She looked down, pressing her lips together. She hesitated, like she had to decide if she was still going to lie to me. Then, she exhaled and whispered, a year. My stomach twisted. A year. I had suspected something for months, but a year? I leaned back, suddenly lightheaded. I thought it was real, she said, almost to herself. I thought she stopped. Shook her head. But I guess I was just one of many, huh? I didn't answer. She rubbed her hands together, jaw tight, like she was holding back tears. Then, she straightened. Okay, she said. Let's make a deal. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of deal? She leaned forward, eyes locked on mine. You don't get mad at me. And I don't get mad at you. I exhaled sharply. That's not how this works. Her lips curled into a bitter smile. It is now. I narrowed my eyes. And what do you get out of it? Her smile faded. Revenge, she said. And what I saw changed everything. It wasn't a message thread. It wasn't a photo. It was a video. Of Daniel. Sitting on a hotel bed. Shirt unbuttoned, drink in his hand. And a woman's voice, asterisk asterisk not Isabel's, asterisk asterisk giggling from behind the camera. My blood ran cold. Who is that? I whispered. She pulled the phone back and locked it. Amanda. I swallowed hard. So you've known about her? She looked up at me, her face unreadable. For 3 days. The room felt like it was tilting. You found out about her before I did, I said slowly. She nodded. And I've been waiting to see what you do. A strange, sharp laugh bubbled up in my throat. So what? You set this up? She smirked. Not exactly. She leaned in. But I knew you'd figure it out eventually. And I knew you wouldn't just let it go. I clenched my fists under the table. She wasn't wrong. She watched me carefully, waiting for me to back out. To walk away. To be the bigger person. But I didn't want to be the bigger person. Not anymore. I took a deep breath. Tell me what you have in mind. The next few hours passed in a blur. We sat in that cafe, heads bent close, planning. Comparing notes. Going through texts, emails, photos. Every single lie. Every receipt. Every time he had overlapped us. It was messy. It was ugly. And I was just about to suggest our next move when Isabel's phone lit up on the table. We both looked down. A new message. From Daniel. Daniel, change of plans. Meet me at the Langston. Room 309. The Langston. A hotel. A very expensive hotel. Isabel and I locked eyes. I could see the wheels turning in her head. The same thought running through both of us. Who was he meeting? Me? Her? Amanda? Someone else? Isabel inhaled sharply. Do we go? I didn't even hesitate. Yes. By the time we got to the Langston, it was 2:45 p.m. The lobby smelled like expensive cologne and fresh flowers. Polished floors. Crystal chandeliers. I had walked through places like this before. But never like this. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor. I felt my heartbeat in my throat as the numbers blinked past. 1, 2, 3. The door slid open. Room 309 was at the end of the hall. We walked in silence, every step pulling tighter and tighter at the knot in my stomach. We stopped outside the door. I raised a hand to knock. But then, a woman's voice. Inside. Laughing. Not Isabel. Not Amanda. Someone new. My fingers curled into a fist. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Isabel looked at me. Her expression was unreadable. What now? She whispered. I swallowed. My pulse thundered in my ears. I had thought I knew how this would go. That we'd walk in, confront him, end this. But suddenly, it felt so much bigger. I took a slow breath. Then, I reached for the door handle. And twisted. The door wasn't locked. It should have been. I turned the handle slowly, pushing it open just enough to see inside. And what I saw made my breath catch in my throat. Daniel was there. But he wasn't alone. And the woman? I knew her. Not Amanda. Not some random stranger. It was Rachel. My best friend. I felt Isabel go still beside me. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed, leaning in toward Daniel, laughing softly, a glass of wine in her hand. Daniel smirked at her, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. Like it was nothing. Like it was normal. I had to grip the doorframe to stay upright. Isabel let out a sharp breath. Holy shit. Rachel turned her head at the sound, eyes widening when she saw us standing there. The blood drained from her face. Daniel turned next. And the second he saw me, his entire body went rigid. Y/N, he said, voice strangled. That was all I needed. I pushed the door open hard, stepping inside before he could come up with an excuse. Isabel followed right behind me, her face twisted in disgust. Daniel scrambled to stand up. Wait, this isn't what it looks like, he stammered. I laughed. A cold, sharp sound. Are you serious? I gestured to Rachel, still sitting on the bed, frozen. You don't even know what I saw yet. Rachel swallowed hard. Y/N, listen, but I was done listening. To all of them. You, I said, my voice low, shaking. How long? Rachel looked down at the wine glass in her hand, as if it held the answer. I stepped closer. Rachel. She finally looked up at me. 3 months, she whispered. 3 months. 3 months of smiling in my face, texting me, pretending. 3 months of acting like my best friend while she was meeting my husband in a hotel room behind my back. I felt something inside me snap. I turned to Daniel. You really have no limits, huh? I asked, my voice like ice. First Isabel. Then Amanda. Now her? My best friend? His mouth opened. Shut. Opened again. Nothing came out. Because what could he say? There was no excuse for this. But then, Rachel whispered something that made the room tilt. I didn't know about the others. My entire body locked up. She looked at Daniel then, like she was seeing him for the first time. Wait. Her voice was barely audible. You told me it was just me. Daniel swallowed. Rachel's hand started shaking. You told me, she whispered, that you were leaving her for me. Oh. Oh, this was better than anything I could have imagined. Because Rachel? She thought she was special. Rachel turned to me, her face pale. You knew about Isabel, she said. And Amanda. I nodded. Her eyes flicked to Daniel. So you, her voice cracked. You told me I was the only one. The only one. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Rachel, it's complicated, complicated? She screamed the word. And then, before anyone could stop her, she picked up the nearest thing she could find, her wine glass, and threw it straight at him. It shattered against his chest, red wine splashing everywhere. Daniel staggered back. What the hell, you told me we had a future, Rachel hissed. Her voice was shaking. Her entire body was shaking. You told me you were done with her. She was unraveling. Fast. Isabel grabbed my arm, murmuring, maybe we should, but I shook my head. I wanted to see this. Rachel turned to me then, her expression twisted. You knew, she said, voice breaking. You knew and you didn't tell me. I took a slow breath. You didn't deserve to know. Her mouth fell open. You were sleeping with my husband, Rachel. You don't get to be the victim. She blinked rapidly. Then, her expression hardened. And that's when I knew. She wasn't sorry. She was angry she got played. Rachel turned to Daniel. I quit, she spat. I blinked. What? She glared at me. We worked together, remember? Oh. Oh. Rachel and Daniel had met through me. I had introduced them years ago when he was still new at his company. She had helped him land a big project. She had given him business contacts. She had vouched for him. And now? She was leaving him in the dust. Daniel's face darkened. Rachel, but she was already grabbing her purse. She stormed past us, yanking the hotel room door open. But before she left, she turned over her shoulder and said something that made Daniel flinch. I'm telling your boss everything. Then, she was gone. The door slammed behind her. Silence. I turned back to Daniel. He looked like a man watching his entire world burn. And honestly? He was. I crossed my arms. Well. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face. Y/N, I can explain, I held up a hand. No, I said. And for the first time in months, my voice was calm. I don't want an explanation. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I just want to know, I said, tilting my head, how you're gonna explain it to your boss. Daniel froze. Because he knew. He had lost me. He had lost Rachel. And now? He was about to lose his entire career. I turned to Isabel. Are you ready? She smiled. More than ready. I turned back to Daniel, the man who had spent a year lying, cheating, and playing with people's lives like we were nothing. And then? I pressed send. Daniel stared at me, his face pale, his lips slightly parted. I had just pressed send. The email, the screenshots, the receipts, everything Isabel and I had gathered was now in the hands of his boss, his coworkers, and his entire department. There was no undoing it. A slow, eerie silence filled the hotel room. Then, Daniel laughed. Not because he thought it was funny, no, this was a different kind of laugh. The kind that comes from pure panic. You're out of your mind, he said, shaking his head. Do you have any idea what you just did? I crossed my arms. Yeah, I said, my voice flat. I just took everything you cared about and lit it on fire. He ran a hand through his hair, looking at Isabel now. You went along with this? His voice was sharp, desperate. She gave him a tight smile. You went along with cheating on 3 different women. So, yeah. I did. His nostrils flared. He turned to me. You're throwing away everything over this? A couple of harmless mistakes? I laughed, short and bitter. A year of lying is not a mistake, Daniel. It's a pattern. He stepped closer. You think you're winning here? That you're the victim? What do you want me to say, huh? That I'm sorry? Fine. I'm sorry. I didn't flinch. Because his sorry meant nothing. You're only sorry because you got caught. He exhaled sharply, eyes wild, mouth twisted in frustration. And what about you, he spat. You think this makes you better than me? I tilted my head. I think it makes me done. The fight should have ended there. I should have walked out. But Daniel? He had one last trick up his sleeve. Because just as I turned toward the door, it swung open from the outside. And in walked Amanda. Amanda. The third woman. The one we had only discovered the night before. She wasn't alone. Behind her were 2 of Daniel's coworkers. They had seen the email. They had seen everything. And they had followed her straight here. Amanda's eyes locked on me first, then Isabel, and then, finally, Daniel. Her entire body stiffened. You, she breathed. You're a disgusting liar. Daniel's face turned red. Amanda, but she was already marching toward him. You told me you were serious about me, she hissed. You told me you were in love with me. I felt Isabel tense beside me. Oh. That was new. Daniel hadn't just been cheating. He had been in love with her? I turned to him, my stomach twisting. Well, I said, my voice cool, this just keeps getting better, doesn't it? Daniel's jaw locked. Amanda was shaking. And then, in front of everyone, she pulled something out of her pocket and threw it at him. A keycard. For this hotel room. I booked this room for us last week, she whispered. And just like that, everything snapped into place. This wasn't just any affair. Daniel had been planning something with her. A weekend? A trip? A future? I turned to Isabel, and the look on her face told me she was thinking the same thing. I swallowed the lump in my throat and faced Daniel. So, I said, was she the endgame? After all of us? Was Amanda the one you were gonna leave me for? Amanda's breath hitched. Daniel looked at me, then at her. And in that moment, when his lips parted, when his eyes flicked downward, we all knew the truth. Yes. She was. Amanda's hands trembled. You were going to leave her for me, she whispered, eyes filling with tears. That's what you said. Daniel let out a long breath. Amanda, shut up. Her voice cut through the air like a blade. His co-workers watched, horrified. The emails. The texts. The fact that he had been screwing around with a co-worker on company time. This wasn't just a personal scandal. This was professional suicide. And he knew it. He felt it. For the first time since this started, he looked afraid. His voice was low, almost pleading. Can we talk somewhere private? Amanda laughed. Laughed in his face. You don't get to ask for privacy now, she snapped. His co-workers whispered behind us. I turned to Daniel, shaking my head. You spent so much time trying to hide the truth, I murmured. And now? The whole world knows. His phone buzzed. His eyes flicked to it. He reached for it. But Isabel grabbed it first. She turned the screen toward me, her mouth curling into a satisfied smirk. Incoming call, Daniel's boss. Daniel lost his job. I didn't feel bad. Isabel didn't feel bad. Amanda didn't feel bad. Nobody felt bad. Because he had spent a year treating people like they were disposable. Like he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. So when the consequences finally came for him, nobody was there to catch him. I walked out of the hotel with Isabel and Amanda. None of us looked back. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I filed for divorce the next day. Rachel? She vanished from my life. And Daniel? Well, let's just say karma handled the rest. He tried to rebuild his life. But people don't forget. Not when the entire office has seen your dirty laundry. Not when your own boss tells everyone exactly why you got fired. Not when 3 women who once loved you now want nothing to do with you. People say revenge doesn't fix things. And maybe they're right. But you know what? It felt pretty damn good.